Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and this time we are talking about Metroid Prime 4 Beyond for both Nintendo Switch 1 and Nintendo Switch 2. As it turns out, we've just gotten a couple new website updates for Metroid Prime 4, and these updates I think have some serious implications here. For one of the sites in particular, there are actually several differences I've seen from the original Japanese site that I think have some major implications here. It looks like Nintendo may actually be subtly teasing some very major elements or plot points to Prime 4, and it doesn't look like anyone else has seen or noticed this. So yeah, I think it's kind of an exciting big deal, and that's what we're getting into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches on June 5th, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, your subscription would be appreciated. So firstly, let me point out the original Japanese site for Metroid Prime 4. So this site was made available a week before the big Switch 2 Direct because we had the Switch 1 Direct, and we got our next trailer for Prime 4. We learned about Vuros and Samus's psychic abilities, and we actually already did our breakdown on this whole section here. We did our rough translations of all these little things that are being said, but there is a change on this site that I've noticed, and it's actually pretty obvious because here at the top you see they now have a link to the Nintendo Switch 2 edition. So there's another site where they talk about the Switch 2 edition of Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And there's nothing here that's really too groundbreaking. It tells everything we already know about the Switch 2 edition of Metroid Prime 4, the amazing mouse controls that offer more speed and precision to your aiming and moving around and aiming around, and of course the improved visuals with HDR, 4K support, 1080p 120 frames per second, 4K 60, improved textures, all that stuff. This is mentioned. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond Switch 2 edition is very exciting. And this website update is not the big deal update. We're going to get to that. But I want to point this one out because, one, it's new, so that alone I think makes it worthy of note. But two, I think it sort of shows that since we are getting these multiple website updates in conjunction with everything we've just recently seen, that Prime 4 is not that far off. The fact that Nintendo is going back and updating these sites here, they are preparing us to purchase Prime 4 relatively soon. There's been this concern that Prime 4 might be far off because they didn't give us a specific release date and we don't have a ESRB rating or any kind of rating for Prime 4 yet. But really all I think this means is that the game's not coming out in June or July, which we already know. Mario Kart World and Donkey Kong Bonanza are the first two big games that are coming out in the first 2 months of the Switch 2 era. But after that initial wave, I think Prime 4 will be in that big second wave. Now, what does that mean for the actual release date? A lot of people have been wondering about when this game may be coming out. My personal speculation, I do not know, is September. And my reasoning behind this is, one, I feel like if it was coming out in August, they might be telling us a little bit more about this game. But also, two, we already have a release date for Kirby and the Forgotten Land plus Star-Crossed World in August, and so if we're already getting some dates for August releases and not Prime 4, that has me thinking that's coming up probably a little bit later. But a little bit later could also be maybe October or November, yes. But I also expect that Pokemon Legends ZA will be coming out in November, possibly October, but currently all we know is fall, and usually Pokemon games come out in November, the mainline ones. But I also suspect that there will be another major Switch 2 exclusive to come out for the holidays. I find it hard to believe that Nintendo will not have at least one brand new published Switch 2 exclusive for the holidays. It's going to be great to have both Pokemon and Prime 4 close to that period of time, but I think they will need at least one more exclusive for this first holiday season of their next generation. And so I suspect there's going to be another major game, and I think that will probably come out in October, because usually Nintendo puts out some major releases in October, especially when they have Pokemon coming out in November. And so with all of that in mind, I find myself leaning towards a September release for Metroid Prime 4. Of course, it's just speculation. We shall see what actually happens. Regardless, I think the fact that we are continually getting updates on Prime 4 in some shape or form goes to show that Prime 4 is very likely going to maintain its 2025 release window. But now let's move on to the much bigger website update, and that's the Nintendo US Store page here. So we have this Nintendo US Store page here. They are clearly ready for when pre-orders are announced for this game. By the way, I assume the Switch 2 version will be $70, the Switch 1 version will be $60. We shall see. But when you look through this site, at first glance, you might think that it looks very similar to the original Japanese site for Prime 4. And it is. It is very similar, but it is similar, not the same. There are some key differences here. So when I did my initial sort of rough translations for what was being said on the Japanese site, I noticed that all of these little sections describing different elements of Prime 4, they would say Samus, and then Samus again. They would say Viros, and then Viros again. Survive, survive again. So this Japanese text here, from what I've gotten the rough translations of, is basically just a repeating of the word, and they just have it here in English as well. However, on the US Store page, that is not the case. There is something different going on. So as you see here, for Samus, it says Bounty Hunter, and then Samus Aran. And so I think this is actually going to be a very important distinction. It doesn't make much of a difference here for Samus, because obviously we already know who Samus is. She is a bounty hunter. However, there are some other details in some of the other sections that may actually be a very big deal, and we'll be getting to that. But since we have the official English translation here, let's take a look over what's being said about Samus. One of the greatest bounty hunters in the galaxy, capable of completing any mission no matter the danger. And I actually think this is also a very interesting line. Why? You might think this is par for the course, but I don't think it is actually. Because they're saying that Samus is one of the greatest bounty hunters in the galaxy, not the greatest bounty hunter in the galaxy. And I think that's a very important distinction. It comes with the implication that there are other hunters out there that rival her, that are on her level. She's not the number one flat-out best bounty hunter by far. She is simply part of a group. That's what this line implies, and of course, we already know about Sylix. He is a rival to Samus, and it could simply be alluding to Sylix alone, but there may be more. Now, for some people that think I might be looking too deeply into this, let me point out that on the official Metroid site, this is how they describe Samus. Suit up as indomitable bounty hunter Samus Aran. Indomitable means impossible to defeat. Impossible to defeat implies being the greatest. Number one, not one of, the greatest. So here, there is a very big difference. There is an implication that Samus has competition. Maybe it's just Sylix, but it might be more. Why do I say that? Well, since we are talking about Sylix here, Sylix originally came into the Metroid Prime series with Metroid Prime Hunters. Metroid Prime Hunters was an online multiplayer-focused Metroid game, where there were other hunters. And so, yeah, I am wondering, is there maybe multiplayer Metroid Prime 4? Can you play as different hunters in the multiplayer? Or, even if there's not multiplayer, will we meet other hunters throughout the adventure outside of Sylix? None of this is guaranteed, none of this is confirmed, but it does have me wondering about what's going on, and at the very least, what this does tell us is that Samus does have a rivalry here. She's not just straight up the best, it is up for debate. This is where it gets interesting though, or more interesting. Here we see where Samus meets one of the Lemorn, this alien, ancient, seemingly highly wise race. And they say Lemorn, but notice how I mentioned that there's a difference on the English site, how they say a little bit more here. Friend or foe? This is not on the Japanese site, and this is new information. So Samus is meeting up with this Lemorn character here, and the site is literally questioning, this is a friend or foe. I don't think anyone looking at this was thinking, oh, that's a foe. No, we kind of thought, yeah, that's probably just kind of like your typical sort of like Luminoth, Chozo sort of ancient being ghost that is seeking the guidance, help of Samus so she can go on and save their planet, their homeland. Like, that's kind of like the basic Metroid Prime trope. That's what we sort of assume this is. But by saying friend or foe, you're now having us wonder if there's something else going on here. Now, reading what they say, an alien race that once existed on planet Viros, they make a solemn request to Samus. So when I first read this, I didn't think too much of it. I just thought, okay, they're saying that it's basically dead now, that this is like a ghost or something like that. That was my initial interpretation, and that may still be the case, but I think it's worth considering that maybe there's something more going on here. Because they're talking about this alien race once existing on planet Viros. Why couldn't they say an alien race that's now extinct, or that is no longer alive? Like, the fact that they choose the wording once existed, it does have me wondering what else may be going on here, and we've already had our theories on with Prime 4, given that it has the Beyond subtitle, given that they have the shape of a black hole as the logo, that there's a portal, and black holes and portals, there's been a lot of speculation and theories on how there may be a connection there. Could there perhaps be something going on with this? Being taken to another realm, perhaps a different time? And might that pertain to what's being said here? Possibly. But going back to the whole faux wrinkle to this, when we look at this character, he has like these different sort of like tentacles, right? And this looks a lot like the enemies we see Samus fighting on Viros. So they may be wild, evil, possessed Lamorn or mutated Lamorn that Samus has to fight. They have the multiple limbs, the multiple tentacles. There's a very strong similarity here. And so what's interesting about this is that if Samus is fighting these evil, possessed Lamorn now, then to say that this alien race only once existed on planet Viros, that's an interesting implication. Especially when we consider that Samus is not only fighting these evil, possessed Lamorn, but speaking to this ghost Lamorn around the same period of time. Now, maybe they simply don't consider the current evil, possessed Lamorn as a part of the same race, but they are very similar. But let's move on to the next one. Sylux. Deadly Sharpshooter Sylux. An enigmatic bounty hunter with a deep-seated grudge against the Galactic Federation and Samus. So here they say another bounty hunter. Of course, Sylux is a bounty hunter, and this goes to show what we were talking about earlier, how Samus is just one of the greatest bounty hunters. Sylux is also likely in that conversation as well, we presume, right? But the big deal here is this extra little text they're offering. Deadly Sharpshooter. So this is kind of crazy. Why is it crazy? Let me explain. At the end of the Nintendo Switch 2 Treehouse footage for Metroid Prime 4, we see Samus and Sylux face off, and Sylux shoots towards Samus, doesn't hit Samus, but hits the artifact, this big thing that they're all fighting over. And many people make the assumption that this is simply an accident, that Sylux missed Samus and hit this artifact, that him and these space pirates had this mass calculated effort to bypass the detection of the Federation to get the up on them for this battle so they could steal this important artifact that's so clearly greatly protected. To just blast at it seems kind of like a really silly thing to do. If they are building up this character, Sylux, if he's supposed to be this capable bounty hunter that's one of the greatest alongside Samus, for him to make such a blunder in such an important moment would be taking away from kind of this build-up of him. It's a little bit of a contradiction. And it becomes more of a contradiction when he's described as a deadly sharpshooter. That would mean that he's really good at aiming. He has precision. And so for him to make a costly mistake to miss Samus and hit the most important thing in the room that they've been trying to get all this time, that just doesn't really make a lot of sense. What I think makes more sense, and what I've been theorizing, is that instead, this was actually another calculated move by Sylux, which may seem like a stretch because the circumstances do seem to present it as some sort of unexpected surprise event. But I was already theorizing this before this website update, and now they're describing Sylux as a sharpshooter. Either A, they are just making a lot of really weird mistakes here with how they are characterizing and presenting Sylux, or this was indeed a calculated move. Like when you look at the footage, it doesn't even look like the shot was going to hit Samus. It looked like it was always to the right of Samus to begin with, and it never really misses. It goes exactly to where it was going to go, which is the artifact. And so what we got going on here is that it looks like Nintendo's continually updating the sites. It looks like Prime 4 really is not that far off. They are building up this rivalry between Samus and Sylux. Samus is not being treated as straight up the #1 bounty hunter by far, no competition. There are others that are on her level, seemingly like Sylux, who's being described as a sharpshooter, someone who is known for their accuracy, who's been leading the space pirates on these continued attacks on the Federation, and they were targeting this artifact, and when you take a look at the footage, it doesn't look like he's aiming at Samus, but he actually aims at the artifact. So perhaps intentionally, and from what we've seen of the Lemorne, there may be some time travel things going on, or if there's not, then the Lemorne may not be as good as we have initially thought. So there's certainly a great deal of mystery here, but it also looks like that there is some decent thought going into this story. But what do you all think? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.